Okay.
Great. Good morning. I'm Peter Halley, Chairman of the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers of Nantucket, and this is the duly noticed monthly meeting of the committee. It's March 1st, 2025, a little bit after 10 o'clock in the morning. Before we proceed to our agenda, I just want to remind everybody, if it's not too obvious to you already, that this is all virtual and video, and it's all being recorded, so that anything you say will be recorded. And if you have any sensitive documents or things in the background of your screen, you may want to either blank yourself out or eliminate them. So why don't we get to our agenda? Do have, see, for quorum purposes, let me just sort of call the roll here. Kathy Baird.
Here.
Scott Ulm.
Here.
Patty Deuster.
Here.
Gary Biller.
Here.
Michael Cody.
Here.
Peter Kahn. Peter, I know you're here. Yeah. Lou Bassano. Lou. Don Green. Don. Pam Swan.
Here.
Gene Briskman.
Here.
Donna Martino.
Here.
Lynn Filipski.
Here.
Steve Perlman.
He's traveling.
Bill Gardner. I think Bill is traveling too, and I'm Peter Halley. So we have a quorum. Thank you for all being here. Do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Second. Raise your right hands and we can record the votes. Yep, great. Anybody opposed? No. And then a motion to approve the draft minutes for our meeting of February 15th.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Good. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in full favor?
Aye.
Good.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay. So then we have the we at the end of the last meeting we talked about getting another speaker, and but I think the consensus of the group, and I know I received some emails and other things afterwards, is that the discussion of the capital expenditures, in a sense, was not fully accomplished at our last meeting, and it would be a good thing to take some time prior to the annual town meeting to further discuss. I think the capital expenditures that are facing the town, the decisions on capital expenditures that are facing the town in the near future and a little bit further out, and in particularly the annual town meeting warrant item, which is Article 13, the sense of the town as to whether or not there should be an approval of a plan to build a new Old Island home, and the capital required for that. So with that in mind, that is our main agenda item today, and then we'll go on to sort of follow up on some of the usual agenda items. And let me just, I'll sort of kick this off, and then if anybody wants to chime in with their views, I think it'd be much appreciated. And in a sense, I asked myself, well, what's the purpose of this discussion? because we're non-voting taxpayers and we don't have a vote, but we do have a voice. And I think in general, the purpose of the discussion is to arrive at a decision by the end of the discussion as to whether or not we should use our voice, and if so, how to use it. That's at least my understanding of today's first item on the agenda. What I think got me and perhaps some other folks on this call is that this expenditure for a proposed expenditure for a sort of a new nursing home for Nantucket is quite large for a town this size. And in my mind, the big question, the initial question is not really a moral question. It's rather a financial question, and whether the finances or the financial plan that's been put forward, and I think we saw in part that plan at our last meeting, is really an appropriate plan for a town of this size, and that number one. And number two, whether the plan is realistic. And by that I mean, I'm not convinced that the risks, some of which are outlined at the end of the Brian Turbot presentation, are fully accounted for. And in addition, they're really not modeled into the prospective costs on a taxpayer by taxpayer basis. And I think when one takes into account all those risks and that he is listed, and then adds to them new risks that have cropped up with the change of administration in the national government, one needs to take a second look at the financial viability of building a new facility. So that's where I'll kick it off, and I can come back and yes, Pam, I'm going to call on Pam, because Pam is, I think, I've sort of looked at the CVs of all of us, and Pam probably has the most relevant CV for this issue. So I'll call on Pam first.
Okay, so Peter, since you reached out to me about this, I have a couple of just historical comments, and then I'll kind of tell you the perspective. So this facility has been evolving on the island for over 200 years, although it wasn't until 2007 that it was actually a licensed Medicaid and Medicare nursing facility. I think the island has always realized that operating a facility of this type is not the norm for a municipality. And I think they have always done this out of the realization of how difficult it would be to have their elderly population and family members transferred off the island. So just for a point of reference, since this is a skilled nursing facility, anyone who goes into it is supposed to have a 3-day hospitalization prior to being transferred there. And then they basically have 100 days of usually benefits to get rehabbed and return home. But our island home is a bit of a unicorn, because in addition to offering the traditional skilled nursing care and all the rehab and PT that might go along with that, they also have in residence individuals who simply can't make that transition back home. So they may be a step between like assisted living and skilled nursing, but they can't be alone in their homes. So they stay at like a different level, a level 2 versus a level 3. Those are the people who can end up staying there for a very long period of time. And I have actually tried to request some, reimbursement information and things so I could understand more how they are being paid for some of that. The reality is that it's unfortunate they didn't do this a few years ago. Costs are always going up on Nantucket. I'm sure we can all say we wish we bought our houses 20 years before we did. But personally, I feel like if this particular body comes out objecting to this proposal or to this, expenditure, it really gives us, it kind of solidifies that look of the we versus them, that the non-voting taxpayers or the non-full-time residents are not as invested in some of the things that this island needs to survive. I think that the average cost of a home is 2.7 million on Nantucket. We probably all own homes that would be appraised for that amount, if not more. You do the math and it's like $500 more of taxes. There's a certain perspective of, we are the wealthy people on the island who are using the services, impacting the environment. They really don't like us anyway. Are we willing to pay to support something that philosophically makes sense for the families there, that financially makes no sense at all? So I think it's just, the realization that if someone needs this care, if someone's coming out of a hospital and they have to be transferred to the mainland and their family has to go back and forth, this is totally a delivery of care and convenience kind of thing. The one thing that I think no one has looked at, and this kind of struck me, is that when this moves to the Sherburne Commons location, it actually is giving Nantucket sort of a campus where they will have a residential senior community and a skilled nursing facility in close proximity to each other. This will be the first time they have something that potentially could be attractive for a non-for-profit company to come in and purchase. Because operating these places is not a money-making deal, but there are some very good organizations out there that operate independent living communities for seniors that are quite lovely. I call them the cruise ships. And on their properties, they have skilled nursing facilities so that if people get to that stage of life, they can step down. So, my feeling is that moving it is a good idea. Keeping something on the island is a good idea. And I'm not sure that our organization would get the best response or whatever if we come out vehemently against it.
Okay, so let me just address that and then go on to, I see Peter and Scott have hands up. And Jean has a hand up too. And maybe others, because I can't see everybody, but on the issue you raise, which is one that is very concerning to me too, is the us versus them issue. And I think that there is a constructive role that we can play that is not us versus them. And that constructive role is shining the light on what are the real facts in terms of the finances, because I don't think that light, it's out there, but it's not very bright right now.
And it may not being operated or managed in the most efficient way. The town doesn't have the expertise, so there are probably ways this thing could operate more efficiently on a yearly basis. But we don't know, anything about that.
Yeah, and then just also to address us versus them, which I would like to avoid, is I understand, and perhaps Peter Kahn can correct me if I'm understanding correctly, that there is another committee of the town, somewhat like ours, which is the capital expenditures committee, and the capital expenditures committee, prior to the FinCom vote, came out against this capital expenditure. So with that, and so that's just a way of saying it could be us and us, versus the facts, or shining light on the facts. So that's sort of my take, and maybe rounding the corners on us versus them, of just, we're all in this together, and we might well understand what the most likely set of facts are going to be, because I don't think we have those facts before us now. So Peter Kahn.
Thanks. Just a little background. I took the time and maybe others did as well, to watch the Finance Committee meeting. It was on, I mean, I didn't see it live, but the Finance Committee of February 11th, when this was discussed. And I must say, it was a real eye opener. I mean, in the sense of the quote unquote financial analysis that was undertaken, there was none effectively. Right out of the box, they said, well, this, yet we recognize this doesn't make any financial sense. I mean, that's right there. But that this is a quote unquote moral issue. And so to me, it may well be, it may be a moral issue, but a finance committee is not tagged with making moral decisions. They're tagged with making financial analysis. Individuals can have all the moral positions they want. So number one, I was troubled by what is the role of a finance committee. Number two, I was particularly troubled by one of the select men who sits on apparently there is a subcommittee that has been looking at our island home issue for several years, and she came out flat out. It's right there you could hear it for yourself at the end, saying, look, all this discussion may be well and good, but remember that 80% of the cost will be paid by those who don't vote. So don't worry about it, is what the point was.
Yeah.
That sort of blew me away. I had never heard it quite so stark as that. And I think, I do think we need to address this issue. The financial viability, the facts. I mean, what does this make sense? Are there alternatives? At the same time, I don't think we should shy away from the us versus them, because I think if we put this in the right context, the us is, we're with them. I mean, this is for the long-term benefit of the island, that we make this analysis, because I think that if this sort of freeloading idea goes on forever, where 80% are going to pay for everything, people are not, it's got long-term ramifications. Many of us will say, hey, is this the place we want to live? I mean, there are a lot of other good places out there that may be less crowded and whatever else. If this is the government that we're facing and the costs that we're going to incur, it raises a lot of questions. Finally, there are people, I think, that we can align with. Very impressive is as many of you know, is the chair of the Finance Committee, Diane Cronow.
Denise.
I'm sorry, Denise Cronow.
Yeah.
She had the guts to stand up at the select board meeting the other night and in the public comment section to come out and publicly say that she was against this. I mean, she voted against it, of course, in the Finance Committee, but to take a position against her committee. And she's very well respected, and she runs a hell of a committee, I must say. I mean, a hell of a meeting. She really is very good. And also Jill Veith is on that committee, and she's was very articulate on this. And others have talked about the fact that actually young people on island, this is not a slam dunk, because young people on island may say to themselves, hey, look at they're talking, by the way, about, effectively a $700 increase in taxes without the residential exemption. People are going to start saying, we may not, live our entire life on this island. Do we want to be paying that sort of thing? So I do think we should explore and talk to Denise. And then finally, I think we should look, when the hospital was built, it was built with voluntary contributions. I do believe that for those who are proponents of this, that ought to be explored. And I think a lot of it could be raised that way. But to stick it on the backs of the taxpayers, I think is a mistake. So I am for it. Bottom line is, I think we should address this publicly in the right way and not be afraid of the us versus them issue. Because I think if we do it properly, it can be an educational point to the community.
Thanks. Scott.
First, I think we're wise to be wary of the us versus them. On the other hand, this discussion is as squarely in the remit of this committee as of anything I can think of. This is ultimately an allocation question. And all the allocation questions we make with the public fisc have a moral element to them. And you're choosing one thing versus others. And so the question really is this the wisest allocation of a tremendous amount of resources of the island? And let's remember future debt capacity as well. The debt thing here is remarkable. And implied in that is a significant impact on our potential resilience if we really, really need to make mandatory expenditures. We get a big weather event, and we've got $400 million in debt, and we've lost, our credit rating down to, nobody's saying, but it's not going to be AAA. That becomes a considerably harder thing. The other part to it is just the on the face of it practicality. I found my HP 12C, for those of you from the 80s who remember these, quite useful actually. And when the numbers that we heard were $16 to $17 million, if I recall correctly, annual debt service and operating loss. If you divide that by 45, and I heard it might be 40, you get to an annual cost of $355,000 a head before whatever the residents are paying, which seems substantial to me for 0.003% of the population. And by the way, I suspect those numbers probably have more upside on them than they have downside.
That would be a head, not a head, right, Scott? It would be
no, per 355,000 per head.
Well,
Per 45, per the 45 people who could be
16 million divided by
okay,
by 45.
but what I'm saying is they have 45 licensed beds. The same person does not stay in that bed all year. So
Okay,
it's
fair
really
enough.
bed, not person.
Per bed, but we're
Yeah.
but we're
And
30,000.
45 beds aren't occupied all year either.
No.
There's probably a lot of weeks where there's 30 people in there. So
Right.
Okay, so starters are 30,000 a month. Big number. And in a world with and yes, I get the moral piece here, but all of us see that Nantucket is changing and that there are a variety of needs appearing on the island, human needs too, particularly with the large non-Nantucket born now resident group, which are going to need to be met too. So all of that, I think we need to be a little bit mindful too. I also felt the discussion of alternatives was cursory at best.
Yeah.
The dismissal of private stuff because, they're just after the land. Well, okay, let's accept that as read. Is that such a terrible thing that we might find, 5 or 6 or 7 acres and have somebody profit from that at the end of a 50-year lease? Maybe that's not such a horrible thing to occur. So from this concept of, is this an appropriate allocation? What are the alternatives that we're trading off against it? Seems quite blithely. How does that weigh against all of what we will and may face in Nantucket for the use of, our tax-paying capacity? And, have we really thought through the alternatives? I think that all adds up to a very substantial question.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Scott, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that kind of floored me was the fact that they decided they would not sell the land where the current Our Island home is on the water.
What's up with that?
Yeah, like they would build a senior center there. Like that is probably a really valuable piece of land that they could sell to offset certain costs.
and generate a lot of tax revenue. once it's sold.
Exactly. I mean, so I think you're right. They haven't, on the one hand, yeah, I get it. They're taking it from a moral perspective, but they haven't really shared a lot of numbers. Like they haven't shared how much of their, how much they're taking in from Medicare and Medicaid, how many people are private paying for services,
Right.
There's a lot of numbers that no one has seen. But I do think the land thing is a big issue.
Well,
Yeah,
one of the reasons,
Yeah.
I heard earlier discussions on that, Pam, and I don't know why they want to build the new senior center there, but that is a coastal resiliency area, I think. I think it's going to be underwater. So that whole,
Absolutely.
Okay. That
But-
makes it less attractive, I guess, to sell it.
or
After
at
2050,
some
say
point it's
that.
going to be gone, right?
Yeah, but I think to.
Peter Howie, there
Oh,
are,
okay,
there are other
let's
people who
go
are trying
one by
to.
one. But let me just interject here because the issue did come up on Medicare and Medicaid payments, because that I think is one of the risks that was not included in Turbot's analysis, and particularly with the change of administration, where so far apparently there is a sort of mystical 100 to 200 billion in tax cuts in the House bill, that when you look, the only place it can come from is Medicaid, but it doesn't say that. So what I did, because we don't have statistics from the island on how much of the annual income of that facility is provided by the federal government in the form of Medicare and Medicaid payments. I found on the CDC website just some generalized information on personal health care expenditures by source of funds in the United States. And the last year that was available or on the website was 2019. And there, if you, Medicaid alone is about 17.1% of expenditures. And this is probably a population that would be more reliant on Medicaid than not. I don't know. And Medicare was 23% of expenditures. So that totals up just around 40%. If some significant part of those expenditures are at risk, and you build this facility and that income is not there that you have built into your model, we then have more of a shortfall that has to be financed by the owners of the facility, which sounds like it's going to be those of us on this call plus everybody on the island, although we don't directly own. So I just want to, that's part of the financial analysis that I think is woefully missing, and therefore gives a misleading picture to those that are ultimately going to make the decision here, which is the voters. So that's just in addition. Gary.
Okay, I have several comments. I've actually written them down so I won't miss them. The first thought I'd like to make everyone, remind everyone, and maybe the people in town ought to be reminded of this as well, is that there are consequences of bad financial decisions. What are those consequences? Well, if you overreach when you're buying a house for your family, which you think is going to be great for the kids and everybody else, and it's a bad financial decision, the end of the day is you lose the house, foreclosure. The same thing happens when business people make bad financial decisions. The end of the day, they go bankrupt and they lose it all. And that is the result of making bad financial decisions. There are consequences. So let me just talk about the old island home. The first thing is, I've watched this over the years carefully. It is designed far more beautifully and expensively than absolutely required to meet the latest requirements for nursing homes. They really built this Taj Mahal of and I don't know whether or not, if they felt restricted by expenditures, they could not bring that in for, say, 50 million instead of 100 million. So that's the first thought. Second thought, one of the things that was mentioned when Dawn Holgate was busy advocating for this at the financial meeting, she said, and don't worry about it, because when we get the bids, by the way, we don't know how much it's going to cost. The final bids are out for estimate now. So all those numbers that you have seen thus far are not final. The 106 isn't final, the 115 isn't final, because they have reached out now for the final bids, and those will not be available for another 2 more weeks. So just before the meeting, the annual town meeting, will be the first time we'll actually find out how much that's going to cost. But let's talk about fixed price contracts, because so-called fixed price contracts are not really fixed price. As anyone here knows who has ever built something, any real estate, the magic words change order come up. And eventually they appear on any major project because of regulation changes, availability of materials used in construction, and other miscellaneous causes. So the 105 or 115 million number that is being used will likely be far exceeded in a project that is this large and takes so long to complete. Next thought. And of course, some of the other planned capital expenditures, which we saw, will also be approved, which will increase the amount to be added to the tax bills to a far greater amount than just the huge assessment from the Old Island home. The approval of the Old Island home, this gigantic project, what we were shown will likely add more than $700 a year to non-resident taxpayers for more than 25 years. And with the addition of additional costs per year from some of the other capital requests, some of which will be approved, some of which have to be approved, right? I'm afraid it'll begin a vicious cycle from which Nantucket will likely suffer and may not ever really fully recover. Remember that the taxes on real estate owned by businesses, many of which are local, they're paying the full amount. They don't get the residential. So all the businesses in town will be paying the full assessment, not just the 700, but the 700 plus based on all of the other capital approvals. The same for real estate owned by non-residents, which are rented to local businesses as well as to local residents. And of course, the cost, 700 plus, will be passed along to the businesses and or rentals. In addition, non-residents who rent their properties out may decide that these extra costs are really not worth continuing to maintain property in Nantucket. And as Peter was suggesting, it'll be a less desirable location. And so many will decide to sell. And what we know is that when these homes start getting sold, non-resident buyers will probably pay more and they'll end up as the new owners, which will exacerbate the current housing shortage and the availability of housing for residents. So as we have seen, the Finance Committee, in approving the Old Island home proposal, indicated that they were making a moral decision, notwithstanding their recognition that the Old Island home proposal was financially unwise. And of course, perhaps motivated by the fact that non-voting taxpayers would bear the lion's share of the burden. So here's a good way to test their statement. Suppose our committee would recommend to the select board that as part of the approval process for the Old Island home, residents would give up the benefit of their tax exemption for that portion of the addition arising from the cost of construction of the home. It could be in the form of a special assessment, or it could be in the form of a betterment fee, since these are the same residents who are likely the only ones who will be benefiting from the new building. Now, I imagine that local residents' moral concerns will suddenly not be as important to them as their financial concerns. But if on this basis, they will be willing to share the burden equally with all taxpayers, then perhaps the project should go forward. But even then, it will certainly hurt Nantucket in the long term by raising the costs of everything even remotely connected with the project. Those are my thoughts, gang.
Good. I just going to go to Jean. This moral decision, though, reminds me of another moral issue that we hear a lot about, and that's called moral hazard. And when one relies upon somebody else to bail them out because they're assured that that's going to happen, that's, I think, the definition of moral hazard. And so I take a look at competing moral decisions here because I think that the reliance on, oh, they'll pay for it, is a moral hazard because it relieves one of the obligation, I think, to make a wise decision. Anyway, Gene, I'm sorry.
No problem. Just as background, I have some background in this field. I'm a trustee and on the finance committee of an organization in Boston that runs 6 senior housing facilities, runs 2 SNCs, has two rehab facilities, has memory care facilities. 2 of our facilities are CCRCs, continuous care retirement communities that have independent assisted living, have memory care as part of it, has nursing homes as part of it, so that I think I have some understanding of the whole process, although I may not have all the detailed numbers. I do know that not only is that organization incredibly well run, but the governor, both the past governor and current governor, have asked our people to assist with various issues that have come up in helping the government better understand what goes on in the whole nursing home and senior living arena. In fact, during COVID, we were brought in because of how well we dealt with our residents for COVID. We were brought in by the governor at the time to work with Health and Human Services to come up with plans for all senior housing facilities in Massachusetts. Anyway, it's incredibly well run, but if it weren't for philanthropy, we wouldn't be able to manage. So that despite all that we do and how well we do it, we still need philanthropy to run the place, because the costs, the revenue, for the payments from Mass Health, which is the Massachusetts representative for Medicaid, and Medicare, do not come near covering the costs of running a nursing home. That's just the way it is. And that the $5 million that Nantucket loses each year in running the nursing home will continue forever. And it probably will get higher and higher as the current government, federal government, cuts back on Medicaid payments, which my understanding is part of their thinking. So that money losing is just almost part of being in the business, unless you have a huge percentage of full paying market rate customers, patients, and that's often hard to do. The things that trouble me are, earlier it was said was that we would be paying about $700 more an hour for our average non-resident home would be paying $700 a year more, where the residents who get the tax benefit would only pay $200 more. So basically, we're going to be picking up 75% of the cost of over 25 years of paying off the debt. And we will never, I doubt there will be more than, in the course of the 25 years, more than a dozen non-resident taxpayers who would make use of the facility. Because the nature of nursing homes is, and the nature of senior, where seniors wind up living is not where they may have spent most of their life, but where their kids are. You see this, we're down in Naples, Florida. People who leave Naples seniors move to Cleveland or Chicago or Boston, wherever it is, where their adult children live, who want to be close to them and want to be able to look after their parents. And I suspect more and more of the Nantucket kids wind up leaving, even probably now, wind up leaving the island and move to other places because there are better work opportunities or for whatever reasons. Once they go to college in Boston or New York or St. Louis or wherever it might be, many of them probably stay there. And so their parents who may become eligible for our island home wind up not staying in Nantucket, but moving to wherever their kids are. So I just think that this is basically, in my humble opinion, a waste of money. We may need some type of facility that for certain periods of time will need to provide physical therapy or short-term rehab. But even that, for short-term rehab, you're probably going to go, if you had your knee operated on at the Baptist in Boston or special surgery in New York, you're not going to come to Nantucket for 2 weeks of rehab. You're going to stay in Boston or New York or wherever it might be. So even for that kind of service, I don't think our community will be using the facility. And, you know, I'm kind of rambling, but I just sort of think that we ought to take a stand against it and not worry about the us versus them, because we represent the us. So our people would be 100% against it. And as a representative of that group, we should be against it.
Yeah, I
May I
don't,
speak?
Yeah, Donna is up next. Yeah.
I'm listening to everybody, and we have lawyers, we have financial people, members of our committee. And with the experience, the expertise, and the thoughtful personal analysis everyone has brought to the table today in today's meeting, it's such a shame that this cannot be utilized in something like the Capital Committee, the FinCom. All of these thoughts have to be discussed in order to reach a financial decision. It's a shame that we're not involved, and we should be. Okay. The other thing is, I don't have a financial background, but it is glaringly showing that this was not thought through very carefully. There really wasn't that much of an analysis. Rather than spending 100 million, it's always easier to spend somebody else's money. And I think this is an example of it. $100 million, why not reach out to a healthcare corporation and offer them land or financial incentive, which would be far less than $100 million, and move it to Sherburne Commons and have a wonderful healthcare campus and have them responsible for it. And the whole thing about we versus them, I think we should turn that around a little bit. We frankly are all investors in Nantucket. We're not a we versus them in reality. some people like to use that and say, okay, you're coming and you're using the facilities and so forth, but we're certainly paying for our footprint on the island of Nantucket. So we're investors also, just like the residential ones are. I just think everyone who's spoken today really had so many reasons why we should consider this and appropriately make some kind of a response. Thank you.
Thanks. Lynn, I think you're up next. And Michael, I see your hand.
Oh, yeah, no, whenever you get a chance, no rush.
Patty Brewster's hand is up, but not on the screen, so you probably can't see that.
Yeah,
Patty, can you put your hand on the screen?
It's in my brain. It doesn't
Okay.
have to put it on the screen, but Lynn.
I'm on the
Oh,
screen.
and I know
I can
Kathy has her hand up. Peter has his hand up again. Or he
If you
didn't-
raise your
no.
hand, not by a physical hand, Patty, but there's a button where you can raise your hand, then you'll be in order. Everybody will be in order of when they raised your hand. That's the way it works.
Yeah,
So,
I know. There's no button on mine, but yep, I know what you're saying.
bottom,
I
it's-
just want to save
Okay, so
enough
Lynn
time.
is up now.
I just-
Lynn is up now.
Oh,
And
can
and
I-
just wanted to
Can I just
mention-
interject that we're all sharing these ideas and these are really good ideas, but can we save enough time, because we've been doing this almost an hour, can we save enough time at the end to say what we're going to do? It's not just, I think everybody agrees with everything, they're common thoughts, but we need to do some action, so save some time for that.
Absolutely. That's what I said at the beginning, that we need to find out where we all are, and then, what are we going to do about it, if anything?
Okay,
So-
ready for me?
Yep.
Okay, so I worked for 10 years at NYU Rehabilitation Services doing occupational therapy. And our patients who stay are they're paid by their insurance for 30 days, and they have to guarantee 5 hours of full therapy. So this is not what Nantucket can probably provide, because this takes multiple specialists, which raises the cost of running any kind of short-term facility, which would be better taken on by Nantucket Cottage Hospital, except they don't do complicated brain surgery, heart surgery, things that require 30 days. Orthopedic things can be done outpatient, and there may be a way for the island to step up with more visiting nurse outpatient services that can be provided. If you look at the Cape, there are multiple places between Provincetown to Providence that would provide services at a better cost benefit than what we can do as a cost benefit. And as sad as I am to think that we're leaving a portion of the island behind, I was also in a family situation where I drove 5 hours to see my mother, who was doing long-term care. So, this is the reality of what happens when you're older. You don't get to stay near your home necessarily. And I understand the history of what we have. So in terms of what we do as a committee, I want to be very careful of us stating something that is definitive that we are for or against. That the proposal should be, we have considered the following and recommend that more careful consideration by both the voter and town government be given based on really what we're saying is the negative side financially, that makes it impossible for a town of our size to be everything for everyone.
Thank you. And so I think the next is, I think Patty, you already said what you wanted to say. Is that right? And then
Kathy Baird haven't had a chance.
Kathy is next on my dance card here.
Okay, just real quickly, I happen to know a family, and the mother went into our Highland home, so I can just give some perspective of the kinds of people that are there. I'm not saying one, pro or con on this, but basically it was a very long-term situation, an end-of-life kind of situation, but it lasted for quite a long time with this person who had dementia, could not live in their home anymore. This is a family that's part of the founding island families. The only person available to visit this person had a business and a job on the island, so could not leave and follow their mother off the island. So it was just a very wonderful place for this person to be and to have the care taken and have it be affordable when you couldn't leave the island to go follow them. So that's just the kind of thing that's there. I don't know what other kinds of patients there are. I don't have any technical information about that, but I just wanted to share that I understand completely what Lynn is saying, that yes, when you are dealing with elderly parents, we've all been through it, I think, or many of us have. It's very painful no matter what happens. It's more painful if you live on the island and you really can't get there to be with a loved one. So I agree, it's a very interesting situation, a very hard situation. The history of it, which was published, I think, in one of the online magazines, back so many years to where the island was taking care of their elderly people long before anybody else was doing that. And it's just an island ethos or an island moral issue, I think, as an islander, how people feel about that. So that's just some other perspective. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, just a couple of quick thoughts, and I want to echo something that Scott said. I think this is absolutely in our wheelhouse as the non-resident taxpayers advisory committee. For the longest time, I think the us versus them has been created because of this dual funding mechanism. And if you go back 5 or 10 years, you had the police station, the fire station, they're all designed like Taj Mahals. And if you look at the history of the town, over 95% of their funding goes outside of the Proposition 2.5 limit. And the reason for that is there's very little discipline, in my opinion, on any kind of financial analytical perspective when it comes to large capital projects. The feeling is 80% of this will be covered by the non-resident voters, and they don't have a vote here. Therefore, we can do what we want to do. And I think that's a very dangerous slope for us to get on, because to somebody's earlier point, the consequences of a bad decision in this kind of heavy debt load, in the kind of environment we're in with what's going on in Washington, could be catastrophic. And what they're leaving the non-resident taxpayers, our only choice is either to sell our property or to grin and bear it. And I think that's terribly unfair.
Okay. Gene and Peter still have hands up. So I'll go to Peter because Gene has been more recently the speaker.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple random thoughts that I think we should just have in the mix before we decide what we think we ought to do. First, during the finance committee meeting, this select board member said, well, there's no room available on the Cape. In other words, the Cape has got waiting lists for equivalent facilities. I think that needs to really be looked at. There are obviously facilities on the Cape, and the question is, can they be utilized? The fact of the matter is, as someone said, many of us who have had issues with their parents, we do travel more than an hour and a half, arguably sometimes. So you take the fast ferry and you're half an hour from Hyannis somewhere, there might be a facility, number one. Number two, during the course of the finance committee meeting, the point was made that, hey, the real estate taxes on Nantucket are incredibly low compared to elsewhere around the country. So and they specifically cited everybody in Palm Beach, meaning all of the non-residents who winter in Palm Beach. So the idea, again, I mean, these are things that we need to be thinking about and how you address this. That, hey, the idea is, hey, we got a low tax rate to begin with, so step it up. With this. Somebody mentioned $5 million as being the cost. That they now admit it's going to be $14.5 million per year.
I think that includes the debt service, though.
Yeah, but it's for, and everybody acknowledges it's at least $14.5 million now. And then finally, I do think we need to realize that this really is not primarily a rehab facility in the sense that we've been talking about. It is primarily, at least the way it's currently being used, and I suspect going forward, it is as I think Kathy mentioned, it is a long-term care facility for people with dementia. That's where the issue is, and so that needs to be factored in. All that said, I still come out where I indicated earlier, but I think it does color how we approach our response.
Yeah. Okay, Gene and then Pam.
Yeah, just two quick things. You know, we always think about in the us versus them that we are the rich people and the people on Nantucket are the non-rich people. But yet a lot of year-rounders are, you know, comfortable. The heck is that?
I've got a ship's clock. That's what's going off in the background. Let me go on mute.
You know, a lot of my friends who are year-rounders are as comfortable as most of us are, probably maybe more comfortable. And my guess is that when they reach, you know, all of them are in their late 60s or 70s, and when they reach the point where they may need to be in some sort of a facility, they're more likely, in fact, I can almost assure that they will be going off island to places close to where one of their children lives. The other thing is, Kathy made mention of that one situation. That's clear is that it would be less expensive for that person to have 24/7 care at home than what it's costing the $30,000 or $45,000 a month that it costs us to run our island home facility. So there are some options which may even be more comfortable and more beneficial to the dementia patient. And unfortunately, in most cases, people at that stage, they don't know that it's sad to say, they don't know that their children are visiting. It brings very little comfort to them, unfortunately, and that's been shown in lots of studies. So just a couple of other comments for saying that the whole idea of $100 million for our island home is just a waste of money, whose ever money it might be.
Okay, Pam? You need to put your mic on.
Yep. I just wanted to say that I'm so glad this conversation took this track, because illustrating how there have been no guardrails on this project. If anyone saw the amount that was allocated for the design, it was outrageous, absolutely outrageous, far exceeds any standard in that industry. I just think that from the time they didn't do this in 2017 to now, there are so many other avenues they could have explored. You know, there are so many other ways they could have skinned the cat. I'm not sure the island has the home care services or the resources for people to do this at home. But I really think that stepping back and looking at this, you know, it does not need to be a Taj Mahal. If they have anything on, there may be another way to skin this cat, whether it's through, you know, developing a home care network, or whether it's redesigning this to be something much more reasonable that just meets the standards for Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement. Absolutely, it should not be on the site it is now. If they have anything, it should be up near Sherburne. There is so much private investment and private equity and companies that invest in these properties, and I cannot imagine that there aren't people who would love to have a residential living community operating on Nantucket. They could attract some full paying people to retire in these communities. But I think they're, you know, they've just haven't done diligence to this whole program.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I think I still see Donna's hand is up, and Jean is your hand still up, Jean?
Sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Yeah, okay. Good. And then, so why don't we, Donna, what are your comments? And then if anybody else who has not spoken or who has spoken wants to say something, then why don't we move into what we're thinking about doing and how we would do it.
I just wanted to say that based on the conversation we've had for the past hour, it seems we're all asking for more, in general, more fiscal responsibility. And I think it's an important opportunity for us to represent our constituents and express our concerns. And these are concerns. It's not a we versus us. We're all investors in the island of Nantucket. So we have an obligation to our constituents and to the island to express the concerns we have because they're real.
Okay.
Oh, and I did want to mention one thing. And talking about bringing healthcare workers from the Cape and so forth, we don't have housing. We have a housing issue. So anytime we talk about bringing somebody in to help anything, we have to figure out where they're going to stay. So that doesn't work.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Gary and then Kathy.
Thanks, Peter. There's one thing I might mention when I think about this project and how it might make sense. I'm thinking about something of, you know, as you probably know, all of the nonprofits that you can possibly imagine from New York, Nantucket, Boston, or elsewhere end up in Palm Beach having fundraisers. And 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were at one of the fundraisers, and this was a fundraiser for Nantucket Cottage Hospital. Now, as you know, Nantucket Cottage Hospital was rebuilt. It cost about $120 million to rebuild. And except for the $20 million that Mass General contributed, the other $100 million came from the donations. During this nice little fundraiser, which I thought would be a normal fundraiser where they're saying, you know, thank you for your contributions in the past. We hope you'll consider continuing to contribute in the future. They said, by the way, we want to tell you about a new plan we have. We have the same problem everybody else has. We can't find places for people to live. The good news is that it just so happens there are 2 lots behind the hospital that we own, behind the brand new hospital. And we have, our architects have done the plan, and we now have a plan to house 40 different hospital workers or families. And in order to do that, we need your help. So we're just kicking off this proposal, and we're now going to look for $100 million.
Jeez.
$100 million for 40 units. You know, even though the town is building,
$2.5 million a unit.
Right. The town, I remember something the town was doing in one of their presentations where they're building, I think it was 20 living units for 14 million or something like that, which is still a lot. But anyway, so to me, the real answer to this is if there is to be a continuation of the old island home, they really have to figure out how to get the 100 million from the granting from the philosophers. You know, there are tons of wealthy people on the island, including some people who are actually residents on the island, who are in the real estate business and have been making tons of money. But there are also a lot of other seasonal people that be willing to step up, as they have for the hospital. And if this is that important, maybe they should figure out not to go forward until they can raise their 100 million from the private donations, and then the town will continue to subsidize by the 5 million, you know, freebie they give every year, just because the hospital can never break even under the current circumstances, and it's going to get worse going forward. But that's my only thought. The only way this makes sense is for them to raise $100 million through private gifts and grants.
Let me suggest this only partially tongue in cheek. Why can't we put this old island home on top of the Bel Air downtown parking garage?
Oh, that, I thought you meant on the hospital lots.
No. No, I do think that Libby addressed the private foundation issue, and that is that somebody has to create it. I don't think the town has the ability to do that. There needs to be some sort of group that gets together and gets something like that started. If I'm understanding her correctly, and I've not looked into whether a town can run, own, or operate a private foundation to provide public services.
I think Libby had said no.
Yeah, I think she said that, but that I would trust Gary to know that better than Libby. So anyway, I think I see Scott's hand up and Cappy's hand up. Scott?
I was just going to say that I think there's maybe a little information value that there hasn't been a groundswell to raise capital for this. It's a different animal than the hospital where everybody on the island can imagine using it or does use it or has had, somebody they know use it. This is a little bit of a different animal. And, and I think to the degree that there is support for raising private capital there, that suggests a much greater consensus on the need. But if there's no interest in private capital, that maybe is telling us something as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Although, Scott, I think it probably is fair to say that there is less of an impetus to get something like that started if you have some assurance that the town is about to do it. And I think that, we've had that assurance for 5 years or more now. That's one point. The other is who uses it. I do have a neighbor, a summer resident neighbor, who on 1 or 2 summers brought her elderly parent up, and they did use it. And so, it depends, I guess, on whether they have vacancy or not, that whether that can be done. But it's not clear. In my view, it's not clear that summer residents can't have some use of this kind of facility, number one. And number two, in general, I tend to think that we all benefit from, having a stable society around us. And this is may be part of that, although I think the discussion here today raises the thought that there are other ways to skin this cat. Although we're way down the road and a lot of cat skinners are around, and the cat's still got all its fur.
Yeah, but Peter, we're going to be facing a similar issue in 18 months with the DPW, because that was 75 or 80 million in the budget. So there's a process question here that I think we need to think about. It's the analytical rigor associated with these large capital projects is just not what it needs to be, particularly as it looks at alternatives. And maybe that's where we could be helpful in getting that discussion more broadly founded, so that you have this analytical analysis that gives you all real alternatives. Because we don't have real alternatives right now for the island home. It's you either spend 120 million or our dear relatives have to go to the vineyard or the Cape.
Yeah. So Michael, you bring up another good point in what you just said. And that is, I think we should take a step back and look at all of the capital demands that are predicted at this point, because in addition to the DPW facility, we have the junior high school, I think it is, or high school.
Yeah, that was in there, and then you've got the coastal resiliency is going to be coming.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues.
In the notice, there's a link to the sort of 10-year funding plan. I won't call it plan. It's 10 years of identified funding needs, and there's a timing for when those needs are planned to be thought about and undertaken, approved, or what have you. And I think it adds up to like $1.1 billion, including the old island home. And in my view, probably excludes a lot of coastal resiliency stuff. There's some in there, but a lot that, people would rather not think about, but they're starting to think about it. So your point being, there are going to be a lot of demands. I think that's Scott's point in terms of flexibility as well. And we have a very uncertain future. And I guess the rather than take on the whole, rigorous analysis thing, I think we can focus it on this particular project. And it sounds to me like the lack of creative thinking about alternatives, the lack of thinking about can we build a facility that meets the requirements for government funding, the Medicare and Medicaid approval requirements, that all of these are good ideas, with the notion that we're not for or against it, but we are definitely for more rigorous planning and thinking that does not overburden the town with the need to raise taxes or something like that. I think that's something like more or less what Lynn was suggesting in terms of the going forward. So Kathy and Peter.
Okay, just so real quickly, I do recall, I mean, I know this has been going on for years, and I don't remember how long, but the idea of doing this, and that voters have turned it down several times for the similar reasons that we're talking about. Now the price is even bigger. I'm not feeling that they'll pass it, but just there has been a lot of due diligence, and that we don't know about. It hasn't been publicized. I think there's more in the background, because I remember Libby saying things like, yeah, we looked at that, when people come up, yeah, we looked at that. So there's a lot of information we don't have. I know they looked at, is there a way to do long-term care in people's homes rather than bring them into a facility? We all know it's very expensive. If you have long-term care insurance, then you're covered. Other than that, it's extraordinarily expensive by any stretch. We had my mother-in-law living with us and had that kind of a situation for 5 years, and it was only possible because she had the money to be able to pay for it. But most people don't. So that's they've tried that. I don't know why it didn't work out. And then I think, so I think there just has been due diligence. We don't know about it. Publicizing that due diligence, I think would probably help the situation as well. So I'm just saying that it's been going on for years and years, and I don't see how the taxpayers are going to move forward with it. I just don't. Thank you.
Okay, Peter? You need to unmute.
Muted.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to turn the discussion now more towards, how we intend to make our position known. And I think it's a difficult issue, because obviously the easy thing to do is to say financially this makes no sense, end of story. But that's going to underscore the us versus them more than anything else. And so I think we need to come up, and we need more than just to say that this needs more study, because I think Kathy's right. I mean, one thing that was coming through loud and clear in listening to these meetings is that there has been a lot of due diligence, the quality of which I don't know, but it's going to be easy for them to say, oh yeah, we looked at that. It would be great if we had, and maybe some of us know, I don't unfortunately, of people who sort of are in this industry, who could give us some advice as to what specific things we can point to as legitimate things, either to do more work on or alternatives, et cetera, in our response. Because I think our response is going to be very important as to how we frame it, because we don't want to make it too easy for them to shoot us down, and we don't want to make it too easy for them to come at it from the us versus them. So I'd like to talk about a little bit I'd like to hear the views on how best to do that.
Okay. Let me just talk about procedure here a little bit too, so that we can understand what the timing is, and that may help to inform sort of how we do and what we do and when we do it. We have the annual town meeting coming up in what, early May, is it? And the item on the warrant for the annual town meeting is Article 13, which I'll read through quickly. But it is Article 13, appropriation Our Island Home, to see what sum the town will vote to appropriate, and also to raise, borrow pursuant to any applicable statute or transfer from available funds to be spent by the town manager with the approval of the select board to construct a new Our Island Home facility at 40 Sherburne Commons Lane, including the cost of professional services for design, permitting, engineering, construction supervision, materials, and other related professional services, and any other costs incidental and related thereto, provided, however, and this is the important part, that any borrowing authorized hereunder shall be contingent on the passage of a Proposition 2 1/2 debt exclusion vote, or to take any other action related thereto. So this is a two-step process. Step one is going to be the town meeting, and step two is a vote, an actual ballot vote at a voting booth, I guess, on the island, as to whether or not to approve this and other things. And I frankly don't know when that particular election is scheduled to take place.
When the annual elections are made, every year, when they have the annual elections, the financial ones are included after the positions that are being filled.
Yeah.
That could be May, because I do believe the
Yes,
select
it
board.
is.
Yeah,
It
so it'll
is.
be right. Yeah, there's not gonna be a lot of time, Peter. The bottom
weeks
line.
later.
So it'll be 1 and 2, and
Yes.
I also don't know the history of town meeting, and we've often, let me see how to put this diplomatically. We've often been concerned with the lack of a democratic representation at town meetings and a small group of people, passing things. That concern is less with these elections, I believe, because there's a bigger turnout, and it's done in private. So I don't know what the history of things being approved by the town meeting and not approved by the following election is.
It happens often.
Yeah. So anyway, the point is that it's a two-step thing, and this is something that we need to, I think, provide our advice to the select board prior to the town meeting, and of course our advice is public, and any effort to give that wider readership than just the select board members could follow whatever our advice is, and then we could continue that through to the election as well as the annual town meeting. And so the being short and direct and persuasive is a standard that we would need to meet. And I guess the other question is, where are other like-minded people situated on this issue? And how can we support them, or they support us? And now I'm assuming that we really haven't made a decision here yet as to what we want to say and what we want to do, but that it is going to be to question the appropriateness, at the very least, of this expenditure in this manner.
Well, you might want to think about talking to Denise Cronow, who I think is highly regarded, and I think and a seasoned veteran, obviously, of these kinds of issues, to get us better quietly talk to her about how we might best be be lend our support to her position. I would be very interested in hearing what she has to say about that. But I really do think I'd sure like to get some expertise on our side that we can point to, because it's just going to be too easy for them to say, hey, you haven't, because by the way, on this finance committee, it's a finance committee meeting for those who did not watch it. I mean, they had all these people on from that they had hired, the builders and the medical people and all this stuff. Everybody, getting paid, and so everybody supporting it, kind of thing. So we need to be able to counter that, I think.
Also,
Yeah.
I think just as a point of reference, I think March 13th is when there'll be a joint FinCom, Planning Board, and Select Board meeting to go over the recommendations that have been made by all those bodies in one place. So if we want to take a position and present it at that point on the public record, or participate in it, that's when all that will be discussed, just so you know.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to change any minds there. I mean, I think, look, I did speak to someone who was on the Capital Committee who was very upset about the fact that, they gave short shrift to the recommendation of the Capital Committee against this. The Finance Committee did. And they thought it was, they thought there was time, and that the letter writing campaign hasn't started. You haven't seen anything in the press yet. That's still to come. So I do think we have some time here to really come up with a good position. And it needs, I mean, I think it's going to be, we're not going to convince the Finance Board to turn their position around. That's going to the voters. We've got to make our position known in a letter that will be published, and then appear at the town meeting to articulate.
Yeah. I do think that it would be appropriate to at least send something to the Select Board prior to the 13th to start to stake out our position, as we're a creature of the Select Boards, or the town managers, one or both. And I think we owe it to them, and it's part of our obligation to raise the concern that we're raising. And I think so far, we've been silent on this, as far as I know, both now and in the past.
And just listening in is also educational for anybody who wants to
Yeah.
hear what people are
Yeah.
saying.
And we get our 3 minutes, which I expect, if there is public comment, it'll be limited to 3 minutes, and that's usually quite, more than enough to get a simple point across. We can decide how to do it. But the first thing will be to, either draft up an outline or draft up a letter, saying that we've met and done whatever we're going to do, and this is our recommendation, and blah blah blah, and why it's a concern to non-resident taxpayers, which should come as no surprise.
Peter,
Yeah.
would it be possible, as someone had suggested, to reach out to Denise and maybe get some ideas as to how to approach this, or align with her or something?
I think I think the answer is yes. It's possible. That's always an easy answer. Doing it is a little bit more complicated, and I think that this is outside the public meeting, ambit for both us and for her. It's rather, we know who is for and who is against, I guess, to some extent. And that, going back to this Capital Committee, is that a public meeting that they?
Yes.
If it's recorded, I'll try to take a look at it.
Yes.
And I doubt that they have. I don't know whether they have minutes of that meeting yet that have been published, but I'll take a look for that too.
And look at the tape.
Yeah, and was it anybody who saw it, was it unanimous, and what were the reasons, their reasons?
I didn't see it. I just spoke to. I mean,
Yeah.
I think straight financial. It was straight financial analysis.
Yeah, because I think that's basically, we just, in a sense, we jump on that bandwagon. presumably it's a local committee.
It is.
And they,
Yeah, I could find out. I mean, I can find out from the member I spoke
Yeah.
with, if you want.
we jump on that bandwagon, and then also try to get align with those members of the FinCom that were of a similar mind. It's my sense, but it's just my sense that the town management would be happy to be rid of this whole problem.
Oh, I think, yeah, I don't know, Peter, I must say, given the select, Don Holgate's position, and I must say, reading between the lines,
Yeah.
I don't know where Libby comes out on this, but I got the sense that she would be supportive. I think you're gonna see, I mean, they're creatures of the vote, and
No, she has to follow the direction that she's been given.
yeah.
But Peter,
Yeah.
Peter, I think that what you folks have been saying really suggests to me that the best way we can avoid the we versus us is for us to come out strong in support of the capital committee's
Yeah.
decisions. So it's not us saying this, we're
Yeah.
agreeing with one of these town meetings. Here's a committee of the town expressly designed to deal with these issues. And they've made a very intelligent decision, and their recommendation is not to proceed because its financial consequences are devastating to the town of Nantucket. And for us to come out and say we are really in support, so we're not against the
Yeah.
not against the citizens, we're really supporting the capital committee's excellent decision, which is made on, financial decision. And that's one way to cover the we versus us attitude. I think it's a
Yeah,
good
that's
idea.
Good point.
You want me to circulate the link to the
Yes.
meeting video?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
You
also,
know
I think
You
Kathy's
know what day it is? What day
No.
it was? Okay, I'll go find it and I'll circulate to everybody.
But Kathy's point about the meeting on the 13th, anytime we have a chance to raise the voice of this committee speaks to how effective or what we're doing here. It gives a positive that we're working in this committee, and for somebody to stand up and even say that we're, behind what was said, I think it's important to get our voice heard. Is there anybody on island on the 13th?
It'll be by video, I'm sure.
You can do it by video, and it works out really well either way, quite frankly. But thinking about Debbie, if one were to have a headline of what we're going to say, what would it say? In other words, what is our logo or tagline for this? That is
Just what Gary said.
Yeah.
I agree, just what Gary said.
Our
We
committee,
align ourselves with the
we met
capital.
and we are in full support of the capital committee's, well thought out views that
Let's see what they are, though.
very bad financial consequences for Nantucket to proceed.
Yeah, and I would add to that the sub-tab line and the views of a respected minority of the FinCom.
Don't go there, don't go there.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not sure what role the select board has in this process anymore, because when the warrant things, the final thing is published, they usually include comments of the finance committee. Now, I'm not sure that the select board is going to have any comment on this proposal. And I'm not sure they normally provide a comment on these individual warrant articles.
Yeah, I think they're a forum right now. We're dealing with them as a forum at this meeting on the 13th. And it could be pretextual or whatever, but I think we do want to, we're not an independent entity, really. We're somebody else's entity put together for a purpose. And so I think that we need to at least salute that purpose and use that as a procedural way to get our views out.
Yeah, we ought to be informing the select board of our very strong support of the position taken by the capital committee on this important project.
Yeah, and that we representing the non-voting taxpayers are, have, concern over, financial profligacy or something like that. But
By the way, Lou Bassano called me to say he's supporting what we're talking about now. He wants to say we don't support it in its form.
Okay.
So just,
so you're saying you claim to have a proxy.
The other thing about your recommendation, Gary,
Yep.
We ought to figure out who's on that capital.
I have it right
committee.
here, Gene. I just
Because
opened it up. We have it right here.
My experience with people I know who've been on it, it's sort of a very low-level committee. I think it's a committee appointed by the FinCon, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah, but it's got some, right now, I'm just looking at it. Jill Veith, it may be, I think it may be, but the fact of the matter is Jill Veith is the chair, and she came out against, she was one of the finance committee members who voted against it. Peter Kaiser, I don't know him. Carolyn Balzer.
I know Peter. Yeah.
Okay, we know Carolyn Balzer from Howard Matz is on it. Christy Kickham, I don't know her. Dawn Holgate, interestingly enough, is the select board representative, and John Kitchener I know well. He's on. So I think it may have been close to, well, obviously Dawn would not have voted for it, but everybody else may well have voted for it. Right. So, but I can talk. I mean, we can talk to Jill. I mean, we can find out exactly what they're. But there is a tape. I think it was on February 18th. It looks like it was on February 18th.
okay. I got the link for that one.
I don't know. I'm just guessing that's the most recent one. So
I'll look at each one of them and pick out the one that's
okay.
talking about. And
it's called the Capital Program Committee, just for.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So do I have a motion? First of all, we finished with discussion here, and does somebody have a motion that that the ACNVT take a position in support of the Capital Finance Committee's position, subject to having read it.
And other reasonable Nantucketers.
Yeah, yeah. That what the bottom line is that we support their decision, their view,
recommendation.
their recommendation that this not be approved.
Yes. Yeah. So moved.
And is there
also include, we support their
Second.
well thought out analytical recommendation to
Yeah,
get something about the
I think that would be
financial
the
aspects
body
of
of
it.
what we say,
Yeah.
that sort of a criticism, but not so obviously a criticism, more like
Exactly.
forward.
Yeah, kind of damning with faint praise.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Is there a second?
Gary, second.
I second.
Yeah. Then all those, I guess we should do a roll call vote on this, just to be clear. So I'll go, the order I have is just the order that's on my Kathy generated memo here. Hey, Kathy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Patty?
Yes.
Gary?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Yeah. Lou is a proxy aye, I guess. Don Green, have you joined us? No. Pam?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye.
Steve is not with us, and Bill is not with us, and I am an aye as well. So I think
Unanimous.
it's unanimous for those who actually were here to vote.
Who's Bill? Who's
Yeah,
Bill?
yeah. Hmm?
Who is Bill?
Bill
Bill is Bill Gardner.
Oh, Bill Gardner.
Bill, come on.
William. Okay. William.
Yeah,
Quillo to those of us who know him, right?
yeah, that's right. I think he's out in the West Coast now or
I think
someplace.
so. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. I, appreciate the fulsome and open discussion. It's rare that so many minds are somewhat alike. So there must be something to this. And what I'll do is I'll do a kind of a first draft. I'm going to try to keep this to, a page to 2 pages, closer to a page, hopefully. And what I typically do is sort of send it around to the people I think that are most interested in the thing, because I'm wary of public meeting laws. But if I guess the question is, there are a lot of people that have views. I don't want to have an overly edited thing, but I want to make sure that the views are included, because they've all been quite good views today, without attribution. Okay, so we'll move forward on that, and the goal will be to get something out by maybe the 10th or so that it is hopefully in time to get it in the select board's packet that would normally be distributed prior to their meeting.
Are we going to write a letter to the Inky as well?
But that would follow up on all this stuff. In other words, this will be kind of like the base document from which we do whatever we next decide ought to be done.
Yeah, and it would be a good idea maybe to pull in Steve and Patty
Yeah,
so that they can address it when you deem it appropriate.
right, and making some of the contacts, I think too. So that's good. I think there was another. Oh, my only other thing. I did a survey. It was unfortunately it was the survey of only one person. Asking them how somebody who was doing some work on the house, who I know is a good person and all that, how they thought this might turn out, and he thought that this, the default would be to vote for it because you're voting for your family and friends, and that I tend to think that's probably the way it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I was surprised that Kathy thought otherwise. I don't know. I mean, so
Well, just the reason I'm saying that is that somebody on the Facebook page posted this.
Dog, is that your dog, Peter?
Posted the exact same question. Are you for or against? So I've been watching the responses, and it's interesting how many responses are coming out saying, no, this is not appropriate. This is too much money, and so forth. So it's it was surprising to me to see that it wasn't just non-voting taxpayers that were thinking that. There were a lot of residents, but again, that's just representative of nothing at all.
How do you know they're residents? I'm sorry. How do you know they were residents?
Because some people that responded to it, I know.
Oh, okay.
And so I know they aren't. So not everybody, but it was a very interesting, I didn't start it, it's just there. And
Well, I took it the first answer to most questions is no.
So Kathy, what is this survey and how many people have responded? And it just, if there are a lot of people saying it's too much money, it seems to me we want to use those words someplace, because it's consistent with what people are doing.
well, I can send you the link. If anybody is on Facebook, you can follow the whole thing. It's just an open Facebook page. So I can send the link to you and you can read it yourself. But it's, I didn't put it out there. It's just my Facebook page for Nantucket Together, and someone else posted that question.
Okay.
Responding. So
Hope to see that.
Okay, good. So what is next on this agenda? It is, I think it's the
Sure.
Donna
Town
Martino.
Council Study Committee.
Huh.
Oh, are there any other expenditures that particularly caught people's eyes that we discussed today? Obviously, we can take other things up in the future, but as I mentioned, one of the two links that are in the agenda posting has a 10-year plan for anticipated expenditures of $1.1 billion. And there's some, great big eye-opening ones there.
Certainly the $80 million to have a place to store sand and salt.
The DPW and the school are the two biggest.
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah,
Let
and
me
there was
suggest-
raising the steamboat wharf was in there
Let me
too.
suggest to you that with respect to the DPW proposal, the location that it is currently in Nantucket will not be there in 2070, according to the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. And so it has to, the current DPW facility, I'm not talking about the waste disposal, I'm talking about where the DPW headquarters are, where their trucks are, and where they maintain their trucks. By the way, they don't have any buildings for their trucks. They leave them outside all year round, including when it's 8 degrees, because they don't have buildings to cover the trucks. Anyway, that facility in 40 years or more will probably be flooded so often it'll be non-usable. And that's why the town decided to find a place, the Shadbush Road place up near the airport, that they have to rebuild somewhere. Currently, the current facility needs a lot of renovation. And the question is, you want to spend the money now, which will take you another 10 or 20 years, or do you want to build something for the longer term, which you won't have to worry about that issue of the rising waters wiping out your facility? So that's why I'm not sure the 80 million is all of it necessary. I've seen the plans, and just the way Old Highland Home, is at the top of its game. It's beautiful. So is the new facility. It's a really gorgeous facility, and
Well, it's so gorgeous, Gary, that it's 60,000, as I heard it on it's 60,000 square foot at $900, basically $900 a square foot for storage facility. It's a lot. I don't disagree with you that it may need to be moved. Question is timing and as you say,
Right.
the quality of the facility.
Yeah.
Also,
Well,
there's the fact that when the town put it out for bids, nobody bid, just the present operation.
Well,
that's
that's
for
just the
waste
operation. That's the
the waste
operator.
disposal. That's not the headquarters.
Yeah, no, that's not the building. Yeah.
It's a different,
Right.
different place.
Okay, so let's move along then. I think it's on everybody's mind now, and we'll return to this subject at some point in the future, I'm sure. The update on Town Council Study Committee, anything in addition, Donna? Pam?
Well, I was on a plane, so Pam filled in for me.
Mhm.
Pam, do you want?
I don't think there was anything monumental that was
No,
discussed. No.
I listened to it
Yeah.
after, so yeah, it's the same stuff going on.
Yeah. There was a
Nothing
lot of
new.
there was a lot of discussion about how much they should pay the councilmen and value and hours they'd be working and support.
Right, that was, they're still trying to work that one out. I think they decided 40,000, but not everybody is in agreement with that, so. That's it for now about the town council, but I will say, as we've been discussing this, if we had a town council today, we might have averted this subject because it would be a much more transparent operation.
True.
Okay. Well, thanks for continuing to attend those meetings and keep an eye on things. PR committee, Patty, anything additional? Clearly, you guys are going to be figuring into whatever we're able to put together on the Old Island home.
I would like to, at some point, have a longer discussion about, I think this last 2 hours is a very pointed discussion, like Scott was saying, where our group is very relevant. And I think to give a little bit more thought to how we might get the voice out is important, and what shape that would be in. And so anybody who has suggestions, we talked last year about maybe going to some of the civic meetings or whatever. I think, more could be done with that, but I also think more could be done with just letter writing and so on. So I would like to see more ideas from the committee about how to make this committee more well-known in the community, because this financial issue is big and is not going away. And then what about next month in terms of speaker?
Yeah, that's where we're going to go. Confirm meeting schedule and invitees. Somebody would remind me, is it around April 1st, around
April 5th?
April 5th?
Yeah, the first Saturday is what we agreed to last fall, and that's the
Okay.
first Saturday.
4/5, and that's just precisely a month before the annual town meeting. And I think we'll probably have some blowback on this issue probably. But who should we invite for that? Coastal resiliency. We talked about coastal resiliency.
Peter, I sent a note to Leah.
Yeah.
Hasn't responded yet. She's probably off island with the schools closed, saying that that she should be soon getting an invitation from our committee to either speak. And I didn't know whether the date was going to be March 29 or April 5th. I said one of those dates. And I said it's likely that we'd like to have you and probably Vince appear at our meeting. And in the meantime, I was going to send all of you a copy of the third and fourth quarter Coastal Advisory Committee reports. And I have the third quarter one. The fourth quarter report was presented to the select board a few weeks ago, but I don't have a good copy of that to send. So I asked Leah to give me a clean copy of that, and I will send it to our whole committee. So you will have that, and I think it would be, it's a good document from which, say, Leah or Vince could speak to talk about the projects that are ongoing, some of which have been completed, some of which are in the works, and answer any questions that the committee has. I could do a little of that, but certainly not as competent as Leah or Vince. So we need to reach out to them. And if you'd like to do that, you could send a note to them and say, would you give us an hour of your time, for March 5th, or April 5th rather, to attend our meeting and see if they're able to do that.
Okay, I'll be happy to send them a note. Are they on the
Yes.
The committee is on the website, and so I can pick up their
Well, Lee is,
contact.
yes, and Vince is on there. He's the coordinator, sustainability coordinator, and of course he's the more directly involved with what's going on with the Sconset Bluff, and all of those issues, building the roads and all of that.
You saw the Wall Street Journal yesterday.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes, we managed to get
Respond.
first page of a special section, right?
And notice the special section is called mansions.
Mansions, yes,
Yeah.
floating into the sea. Yeah.
I have every time the Wall Street Journal, and it's almost once a month now, they have a Nantucket article, right?
They do.
And every time, I get emails from friends, is that your house? And My generalized response always is, you know, I have future waterfront property, waterfront property. Anyway.
That house you see that fell into the water, you know who George Fraser is?
Yeah.
Well, I knew George. George was the general counsel of J&J.
Mhm.
And I knew him years and years ago when we were both in corporate life, so
Yeah.
the end of that house.
Yeah.
Peter, do you want to talk about the letter we got from that gentleman who was a non-voting taxpayer?
About, that letter? Sure. Kathy, why don't you just do a quick précis of that? I read it very, very quickly. And in general, he's questioning the legality of the tax
Reduction.
tax system of giving exemptions to residential taxpayers. And is that your understanding of that letter, Kathy?
Yes, and I think he sent it to us. He found us on somehow, and I was surprised he wasn't on today. We actually did have another guest who was listening. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if a non-voting taxpayer or a taxpayer, but or how they heard about us. But there's no other non-members on anymore, and he didn't come on to this call, so I'm surprised. Maybe he couldn't, but yeah, he really was just sort of saying, not understanding, kind of like the homestead exemptions that are common in many states, and found things that said they weren't legal, and that I think you responded that you found both. They are legal, they're not legal. So
yeah. So in general, my flip answer is he needs to consult his lawyer. But in general, there's there's a federal issue which I've not looked at, and there's a state issue which I have briefly looked at. And by and large, you just look at the Massachusetts Constitution, which, by the way, is over 100 articles long. And it has a specific article. I think it's Article 4 in Article 112 of that, and a little bit of Article 10. But basically, it's Article 4 and Article 10, Article 4 and Article 112 of the Massachusetts Constitution that basically gives the state and under the state, the municipalities, the power to do real estate taxes and also the power to grant exemptions. And they just have to be reasonable. And so you have to look at the local exemptions on Nantucket and other places, and you might have a challenge if they do something totally unreasonable. But these kinds of homestead type exemptions for some portion of the assessment are typically viewed as being reasonable. So
100% exemption would probably not be reasonable.
That's right, but it's limited to what, 35%?
35%, yeah.
And they're at 25%. Number one. Number two, there's a publication which is a couple of years old from the state showing a sort of a calculation. Because the way these exemptions are calculated is very, very interesting, at least to me, because it's not what I thought it would be. Rather, the tax rate stays the same across the class. We're on this residential 1 class, and the tax rate is whatever it is. And what happens is certain part owners in that class, the resident, year-round resident owners, are able to have a 25% deduction from their assessment. And then that creates that lowers the total value of all the assessments in that class, and shifts some of the burden to people who don't have that assessment. But everybody pays the same tax rate, but just based on adjusted assessments. According to this publication, if you were a local resident in Nantucket And I'm extrapolating from a different example. But if you were a local resident in Nantucket of a, expensive Nantucket house, in other words, well above the average for non-residents, you would actually end up paying more taxes than you would have paid if they hadn't had the exemption. And I think that tends to show that there is some break on the granting of these exemptions. And that may be hard to follow. You're going to have to read this publication, and I'd be happy to send around a link to it.
I thought the new Massachusetts law that the governor signed a month or two ago even allowed the exemption to go up to 50% for certain categories. But I haven't heard much about that. But it looked, I think I saw that in the legislation.
Yeah.
I guess nobody responded on our committee to my brainstorm last night that I put in the talk this morning, that if they approve the Old Island home, that the residents would give up a benefit of their tax exemption for that portion. Nobody liked that idea, huh?
Oh, no, I like it. I like it.
Well,
That's our fallback. That's our fallback,
Okay.
You can
It
divide
might be
the
a little too complicated from the tax rolls standpoint.
Well, those are the people that would get the benefit of it. When you talk about coastal resilience, what Matt Fee always talks about are the betterment fees, because each section of the island that needs to make changes and needs to spend money on it, the people who'll be paying for that is, perhaps 25% from the town and 75% from the local community in the form of a betterment fee. So that's all I was thinking about here. Betterment fee, the people who are going to use it likely are the people on island, because nobody else is going to try to get here the same way they say they can't get off the island to go. So it's the same reason it'll be used by the locals. So maybe in the form of a betterment fee, they ought to pay that. But anyway.
Yeah. Well,
okay. How about
I'm not in your camp yet on this, Gary, but I get closer, I find, over time. Okay. Let's see. Any public comment? I know we had some people on before, but I think as we've tired ourselves out, we probably tired them out too. Any new business or any unanticipated items? I don't think so. So I guess the one thing is, if for some reason the resiliency person or persons cannot come, what's our fallback? Anybody have have we had
Dawn, I think we should bring Dawn Holgate before the committee.
How about Denise? How about inviting Denise?
Well, she
She was on last month.
She often attends.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I think that if we have an item on the agenda, that she probably would maybe come and speak about that, if she could. But I'm thinking like the DP. Have we had the new DPW? Is there a new DPW?
There is. I think there is. There is.
Yeah, and we had that person on. I know the last one we had, I think, only lasted about a year. Indeed, they all seem to last a very short time.
Drew is a great guy to speak, and he's spoken at a number of civic associations. And he can explain why the DPW needs the facility that is on the budget list.
Yeah, I think that, so I'll look him up, and if I'll try to get him if we can't get the.
Can't get Leah,
Yeah.
Well, what's his name again?
Drew
Patnode, Patnode.
Thank you.
Okay.
So he could also be, if our speaker at the following meeting, if we do get,
Leah,
Yeah. I know a big issue thinking about DPW, and I think this may be in their bailiwick. This is kind of partial coastal resilience and partial DPW is just all the groundwater that we're experiencing after rainstorms nowadays. You know, we on our little street, we may have a 20-foot 6-inch deep swimming pool for many days after a rainstorm, and we didn't used to get that stuff, but we do now. And a lot of the storm sewers are just not up to the task anymore. And I don't know if storm sewers are in coastal resilience because they're not particularly on the coast.
You're in the
but
sewer department.
So,
You- David
let's get
Gray.
Ed Norton. Let's get Ed Norton.
Yeah, you want David Gray, who's the sewer director, and he also gives an amazing presentation filled with AV stuff. He's really good.
Okay, I'll look him up too, because but I know for the community that I live in, this is becoming a big issue, and we're actually 26 or 28 feet above sea level there. So
It's the clay, I think. We've had it, Tom Nevers, forever. It
Yeah.
just, there's that layer of clay that's down below the sandy surface. The water just can't drain. It just takes forever to drain through there. That's why we have cranberry bogs, because there's clay.
yeah.
How about a motion to adjourn? Can I?
Okay, I think that's very welcome. Any second?
Second,
Okay, so we're not masochists. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No, I didn't think so. Thanks a lot. Good to see you.
Bye, everybody.
yeah, thank you.
Bye.
They will.
Don't forget to turn off the thing recording.